Hello, and welcome to the course coded OIR 103, whose title is Africa in the Global Context. The course is offered by the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, and it is administered by Dr. Miraj Kitigwa. What is in the course? The course entails such contents, the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial Africa. It also entails Africa in the pluralized world. It has also Africa's poverty and politics of aid as part of it. And we will also discuss about Africa and the globalization effect, as well as the United Nations concern on African peace and security. To start with, we will have to find the place where Africa is. I have decided to subtitle it is Situating Africa in the Global Context. In this section, we will try to establish the unique features or characteristics that make Africa differ with the rest of the world. We also need to formulate an ideal type construct of the African continent that was never colonized before. That is, how would it be like if Africa was not colonized? In the modern world, or space, the position of the country is largely determined by its power, which can be understood either in terms of economic resources, military capability, or both. Although some countries like Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt meet this criterion in their respective sub-regions, on the global scale, they have been increasingly marginalized, especially with the massive development in the world of science and technology, just like many other new states of Africa and Latin America and Asia. So you will find that there are some African countries which have a little bit developed compared to other African countries. Nigeria, as a study case here, is one of the said developed countries in Africa regarding its population, its income, and all other sorts of development. South Africa is an industrialized country. It's part of industrialized countries because it has some white people who are in it, and in most cases, you find that Egypt is a source of knowledge in the world. So sometimes the three countries meet the criterion in their respective sub-regions on a global scale, but they have been increasingly marginalized, especially with the massive development in the world of science and technology. They have not been able to meet the standards that are being scored by Europe and North America. Trying to situate Africa in a global context, we find that at the global level, Africa is considered to be located at the bottom of any conventional ordering of global power, importance, and prestige. We can try to think of trading between Africa and other regions. You will see that the amount of trade that is transacted among the other regions, say Western Europe and Japan, Western Europe and North America, Western Europe and Asia, is far larger than what is traded between Africa and the rest of the regions in the world. So Africa is one of the regions which are located at the bottom of any conventional ordering of the global power, importance and prestige. And we should remember that when we discuss about power, power is so much related with wealth, because wealth can buy out power, and power can capture wealth. For much of modern history, Africa, with its many states, has not been a major player on the world stage. Despite that fact, African states play an important role in the international system, be it negative or positive. In an attempt to situate Africa in the global context, we find that the large United Nations peacekeeping missions are in Africa. They are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They are in the Central African Republic, and in South Sudan, in Darfur, in the Grand Sudan. They are also in Cote d'Ivoire, and many other African countries. So the importance of Africa is visible out there. We also find that billions of dollars in terms of aid and other assistances from overseas development assistance and humanitarian assistance are directed to Africa every year. Though the amount may be minute compared to other regions, the amount is negligible indeed. So this one also points out to the importance of Africa in international system. Yet, the survival of African states and the challenges of peace, security, development, and human rights have been the focus of policy debate and research for decades the world over. It is said that in Africa, human rights is much neglected. Peace is at stake. Development is low at stake. And so on and so forth. You can point a number of aspects that differ much from other regions of the world. But all in all, Africa is part and parcel of the world and have to situate it somewhere in the global context. The new states, especially those of Africa, have suffered untrammeled political calm, economic exploitation, closed with many foreign diplomatic relations that are in most cases hostile to both the people and the environment. So the African states, you can also include states in Latin America, in Far India and Asia, and even in the Middle East. But much of those states in Africa have suffered a lot in terms of politics, economics. Both are exploited in many foreign diplomatic relations that are in most cases hostile to both the people and the environment. So Africa is a matter of concern worldwide. At a time, Africa was called slavery. At other times, colonialism. Then, neocolonialism. But the most permeating contemporary avatar that is eroding the sovereignty of many new states of Africa in the international system is globalization. Globalization has been the most avatar that is eroding the sovereignty of many new African states in the international system. The new states of Africa have not been able to bargain favorably in international division of labor and the social wealth it produces. And this is due largely to rudimentary development of science and technology in it. You can find that the market in Africa is captured by most of the developed countries, but Africa can hardly capture the foreign market in the developed countries of the North. So you find that Africa's past and present relationship with the outside world have shaped their opportunity today. The first in the scene of African historical development is slavery. Here we found that Africans were enslaved and trafficked from the north and the east by Arabs, and from the west by Europeans and North and South Americans for centuries. And it is said that this is the source of the Mike Tysons, the Michael Jordans, and other black Americans, including the former president of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, whose origin is said to be Kenyan. So slavery is the most important scene to be considered in trying to situate Africa's early contact with other worlds. And in slavery, people were captured and sold out to other regions as commodities. Although the demand for this off trade came from outside the continent, it sometimes was done in collaboration with many Africans, including the chiefs and the other mass of people who were used as agents for the accomplishment of that trade. So you can see that the trade of slaves was established elsewhere from Africa. But those who were involved in the same trade included the same Africans who used to capture their fellow Africans and sell out to the slave agents and to be shipped out to other regions of the world. As you can see there, this is an etching of the slave trade, a portrait whereby Africans would have been captured and sold out to the slave agents. Here, it's a caravan taking slaves from their original home and sending them to the slave market, wherever it was. And this is a pure portrait of slave transport in Africa. They were tied up with chains in order for them not to escape from the caravan trips. The early contact of Africa with other worlds in terms of slave trade can be said that slave trade and all others that went with it had a terrible impact, not just on the captives and their families, but on the entire community and politics, whose political economy and culture became distorted. You find that the energetic people are the ones who were targeted for the slave trade, because it is they who would be used in the plantations in America, for household activities in the Arab world, for industrial production in Western Europe. Thus, slave trade, with all its attributes, had a stiff impact not just on the captives and their families, but on the entire community of Africa, in the politics, post-political economy, and the culture became distorted. Trade in slaves must surely have been a dominant feature in many people's lives during those years, influencing their livelihood, family life, personal security, religion, politics, and so on. The second in the scene of Africa's early contact with other worlds was the experience of colonialism. And actually, colonialism has had a very big impact, and it has never ended ever since. Because almost all of sub-Saharan African countries was colonized from around 1880 to the 1960s by European powers. And some went up to the 1970s. For example, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and Angola, and even Cape Verde. And this colonialism was essentially stirred by the British, the French, and the Portuguese, although even the Spanish had some minute elements of colonialism in Morocco and the Canary Islands. But the main colonizers of Africa were the British, French, and Portuguese. Previously, Germany used to be, but after its defeat in the First World War in 1918, all its colonies were confiscated by the Allied powers, which defeated Germany with its allies. So the role of Germany was curtailed by its losing the First World War. In order to govern during the colonial era, the Western powers used all the means to ensure that the colonial influence is instilled in the African region. So, in order to govern their dominions at minimal cost, all the three colonial powers used some versions of indirect rule. That is, they used to opt to the local leader, the chiefs. See? And that's why we would hear chiefs like Mangungo or Nsovero and others who were used by the colonial powers to dominate their fellow Africans, including the tax collection, production, and even enslavement. So for this to work, the local leaders needed to be compliant, or else they would be coerced to do so. So it sometimes happened that the local leaders did not do it voluntarily. They were compelled to do so, otherwise they will be punished. Africa's early contact with the other world cannot be completed if we do not discuss the era of colonialists who introduced a caricature of the European form of governance system. And we can say that that form of governance has continued to date. For previously, there was no president, there was no prime minister, there was no court, and other of the like. But in the era of colonialism, the colonial masters introduced some sort of a structure of European governance system that was instilled, enforced in the African traditional leadership. And the courts, for example, were introduced by the colonialists. They also introduced elected councils. They introduced an executive civil service, and later they introduced the parliament. The current parliament we see today in Africa is a pure replica of the European world. It does not originate from Africa. That's the reality. In addition to the court, the elected council and the executive civil service, the colonialists also introduced a repressive police force. All of these were operated in an uncomfortable parallel with the traditional and the neo-traditional governance systems. So you will see that even the police system that we have today in Africa was introduced by the colonialists with its repressive form. And of course, it has been repressing the civilians to a greater degree. Having said this, we will have to discuss other issues related to Africa in the global context later. Thank you